Morning, everyone. Morning. Taxpayer dollars should be used to make life better for the American people, to drive down the high cost of living, to fix our broken healthcare system, and to deliver a government that actually promotes the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people. Instead, Donald Trump and his administration have been using taxpayer dollars to brutalize everyday Americans, kill American citizens, and violently target law-abiding immigrant families. It's unacceptable, it's unconscionable, and it's un-American. This administration continues to weaponize the Department of Justice, weaponize the Department of Homeland Security, weaponize the power of government to undermine the ability of everyday Americans to live their best life because they're so consumed with jamming their right-wing extremism down the throats of the American people. We will not be intimidated by any of their actions. We will stay the course as it relates to making sure that we actually fund the government in a manner that is consistent with our values, consistent with the Constitution, and consistent with the American way of life. There's a big difference between the Trump administration, Republicans, on the one hand, and how Democrats want to spend your taxpayer dollars on the other. Republicans, in their one big ugly bill, enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, ripped health care away from more than 14 million Americans, and at the same period of time, took $186 billion from SNAP, literally stealing food from the mouths of hungry children, seniors, and veterans. And in that same one big ugly bill, used taxpayer dollars to give the Department of Homeland Security and ICE a slush fund that's been used to unleash a killing machine in Minneapolis, using taxpayer dollars literally to kill American citizens in cold blood. That's what Republicans have done in their one big ugly bill. That's their policy. And Democrats are going to continue to push back aggressively against it. We want to make sure that the Department of Homeland Security conducts itself in a manner that elevates public safety, not undermines it. And the American people are demanding accountability, and that's what Democrats are going to deliver. Questions?
Should we expect any sort of organized response from Democrats to the arrest of Don Lemon this morning, and what do you think that says about the Trump administration?
Trump administration has systematically targeted the free and fair press because they want to intimidate America and oppose anyone who is not willing to bend the knee to their extremism. We are not going to be intimidated at all. The free and fair press is central to the foundation of American democracy. Thomas Jefferson famously made that clear, that he would prefer a country that had newspapers over government as opposed to governments over newspapers. This is central to who we are as a country. And so Don Lemon, we know, is an accomplished journalist who was doing his job as part of the free and fair press. There's no legitimacy, no basis to Don Lemon's arrest, no basis to the arrest of the other journalists, and the American people are not going to stand for it. And House Democrats are going to stand up for them. And the rights of the free and fair press as central to American democracy and our values in terms of who we are.
But how?
I issued a statement as it relates to where we are right now. It just happened. And so we haven't had an opportunity, even as members of Congress, to talk to each other about next steps. But of course, next steps will be forthcoming.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I'm sure you've been monitoring what's going on in the Senate. What's your reaction to the fact that there's not a deal yet with the government deadline looming. Do you have any plans to speak to Speaker Johnson between now and when the House gets back? And do you think that 2 weeks is enough time to negotiate the reforms that you're looking for? I know that there's a lot there, so I hope you can.
We have to deal with the issue of reining ICE and the Department of Homeland Security in with the fierce urgency of now. And a 2-week window will evaluate whether that's sufficient time, but there's urgency to dealing with this issue. Because ICE, as we've seen, is out of control, and the American people know it. The American people know that the Trump administration on all of the things has gone too far, and that taxpayer dollars should not be used to brutalize the American people, and in some instances, kill them. So this is something that has to be addressed. And you know, Democrats in the Senate, led by Chuck Schumer, supported by the House, made a clear demand. Separate out the 5 bills that clearly have bipartisan support. And then separately, we can deal with making sure that ICE is brought under control in a variety of different ways, including our demand, which we will not walk away from, which is that judicial warrants should be required before ICE can storm homes and rip people out of their cars. Judicial warrants. The masks have to come off, and body cameras need to be turned on for everyone. There should be an explicit prohibition on the detention and deportation of American citizens, period, full stop. And lawless agents who are brutalizing everyday Americans and law-abiding immigrant families, targeting them violently in violation of the law, should be investigated and prosecuted independently of the Department of Justice. We cannot trust the Department of Justice. They're an illegitimate organization right now under the leadership of Pam Bondi and the direction of Donald Trump. And so, if anything, the events of today reinforce, as it relates to the Department of Justice targeting journalists and part of the free and fair press, that the Department of Justice cannot be trusted to freely and fairly work through the criminal justice system. And it reinforces our demand that agents who violate the law should be investigated and prosecuted independent of the Department of Justice and the Trump administration and state and local officials. It should be made clear that they have the investigative and prosecutorial authority to go after any rogue actors who are part of ICE, CBP, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Leader Jeffries.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Could I ask you your reaction to the Republicans' new voter integrity plan, the mega bill, and are there any provisions that the Democrats could support there?
It's a dead-on-arrival bill. They know it. Listen, voter suppression is part of the Republican plan to try desperately to hold on to power. Republicans, since the beginning of this administration, have been losing elections all across the country. They've been wiped out electorally. The American people know that it's Democrats who are focused on making their life better, driving down the high cost of living, and fixing our broken healthcare system. And it's Republicans who have unleashed this extremism and brutality on the American people and this assault on the American way of life, our values and our democracy, and have had enough of it. And so Republicans are playing games, just like was evidenced by the unprecedented FBI raid in Fulton County, Georgia. Republicans don't want a free and fair election because they know when that happens, and will ensure that it happens, they're going to lose. They're going to lose the House. They're going to get crushed all throughout America. So the latest voter suppression bill is not a serious thing. Let's just be clear about that. You're asking me a legitimate question, but it's an illegitimate bill that's dead on arrival. It's going nowhere.
I do have a policy follow-up on that bill, just regarding, I remember covering during the first Trump administration, Democrats were very concerned about Russia meddling in elections. Are you confident that the current election systems in all 50 states and U.S. territories will protect the ballot of U.S. voters?
What I am thankful about is that the administration of elections are done locally as opposed to in the hands of the Trump administration and this group of corrupt sycophants.
Mr. Leader, I just wanted to know if you are going to be whipping against the resolution that Greg Steube said he's going to force to a vote next week to expel Sheila Frills McCormick.
Congresswoman is, of course, entitled to the presumption of innocence. She's going through the process right now, and any effort to expel her lacks any basis at this moment in law, fact, or the Constitution. And if, in fact, there's a resolution that is brought to the floor to try to expel the Congresswoman, it's going to fail. It's going to fail. It requires 2/3. It's an exercise that is just designed to get attention and is inconsistent with what due process requires at this moment.
Mr. Leader, progressive groups are criticizing this deal that's coming out of the Senate. Do you think the criticism
What
of
groups?
Chuck Schumer, progressives are
What
criticizing
groups?
it,
I'm
saying
asking.
none specifically, but different ones here
Well,
and
it's hard to
there.
respond if I have no idea what groups you're talking about, because I speak to groups all the time, and I haven't heard that criticism.
We don't like
Do
it
you
too.
support the deal?
Thanks. I haven't, there's no agreement that's been before us right now. Lindsey Graham apparently is holding up the agreement, threatening to shut down the government, because apparently Senate Republicans still support using taxpayer dollars to brutalize American citizens. And on top of it, to make matters worse, apparently Lindsey Graham wants access to a multi-million-dollar taxpayer-funded slush fund. That's insanity. So the Senate has to do its thing before we have anything to evaluate. But I'm going to remain in close contact with Leader Schumer, and hopefully they'll get something done today.
Leader, you said that you were supportive, the House Democrats are supportive of breaking the bills apart, though, and doing the 5 alongside a short-term CR for Homeland. Do you see any problems?
Now, what I said, just to be clear, what I said is that we've demanded from the very beginning, which John Thune said would never happen. John Thune said it's not happening. Then he brought the entire package together to the Senate floor yesterday, and it failed spectacularly. Notwithstanding what John Thune said, which is the bills are not going to be separated out. They will be separated out. We made that demand, and it's happening. And Donald Trump has agreed to that, apparently. So that's what we're supportive of. In terms of evaluating the path forward relative to the Department of Homeland Security legislation, we're going to have to evaluate what the real opportunity is to get dramatic change at the Department of Homeland Security. It needs to be bold, it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be transformative. And absent a path toward accomplishing dramatic change and making sure that ICE and DHS are conducting themselves like every other law enforcement agency in the country, then Republicans are going to cause another government shutdown.
But you've had dozens of Democrats that said they won't give another penny for ICE. Do you see any problems passing the stopgap on Homeland Security if that comes back to the House? Do you think that Democrats will be forced to carry the water if they bring that up?
It all depends on, well, are you talking about a continuing resolution?
Yeah, like a 2-week stopgap on the Homeland bill.
Well, it all depends on how people interpret, a continuing resolution. If it's 2 weeks, that's a freeze on ICE funding. That's not an additional amount being given to ICE. That's a freeze on ICE funding. But we'll have to evaluate whatever comes together once Lindsey Graham stops his temper tantrum, and clearly he's going to have to drop his objection because of his obsessive quest to get this multi-million-dollar slush fund. This is insanity. This is who the Republicans have become. Why aren't they focusing on making life better for the American people? We are. We want to promote the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of everyday Americans. That's what the appropriations process is all about. But Republicans are making it about themselves and their billionaire donors rather than keep the American people safe.
Chip Roy and some House Republicans have said that if DHS funding comes back on the table, they have some demands. How do you plan to get this new final product to be both severe enough that your caucus feels comfortable with it and also not get completely held up by House Republicans?
The demands being made by far-right extremists in the House Republican Conference are going nowhere. And if for whatever reason Speaker Johnson bends the knee to the far right, then Republicans are going to shut the government down because they would apparently have zero interest in getting ICE and the Department of Homeland Security under control, which their own voters are demanding happen. Their own voters.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Last week you expressed hope for a resolution before the House hold to vote on the Clinton contempt resolutions. We know House Rules is going to mark them up next week. Are you still expecting a resolution? Have you been in touch with the Clintons on this?
I have not been in touch with the Clintons, but it's my understanding that their legal team continues to engage in good faith negotiations to try to get to a resolution. My position on the underlying criminal contempt resolutions being brought before the Congress potentially by James Comer remain the same. Comer is not interested in any legitimate investigation. Democrats had to shame Republicans into joining us to force a vote and pass legislation to compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. Pam Bondi and the DOJ are the ones who should be held in criminal contempt at this point because they're in direct violation of a federal law that Donald Trump signed to release the Epstein files that are in their possession. And there are millions of documents that haven't been released. And the only thing that the public has seen are about 13,000. Does that sound like compliance? That's not compliance. That's a brazen violation of their legal obligations, the Department of Justice's legal obligations to release documents. And so we'll see whether there's a resolution prior to a so-called criminal contempt vote, but my position on it remains the same. Yep.
Thank you. I know you said that the deal hasn't come out of the Senate yet, but it's looking very likely that it will be 5 funding bills and a 2-week DHS CR. If that is what comes to the House after Senator Graham drops his hold, will you support that?
Well, that question has already been asked and answered in a variety of different ways. One thing is clear, is that Leader Thune and Mike Johnson and Republicans originally took the position that the 5 bipartisan bills were not going to be separated. The fact that the 5 bipartisan bills are going to be separated in and of itself, right out of the gate, is a victory for the American people. Simultaneously, we have to evaluate, is there a real path toward making the dramatic changes at the Department of Homeland Security necessary to stop the use of taxpayer dollars from brutalizing everyday Americans and killing American citizens, like Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy? That's a question to be evaluated, particularly if we find ourselves in a situation where there's going to be an intense negotiation, where Democrats have drawn a hard line in the sand. We have not been shy or bashful in articulating what will be necessary, including but not limited to judicial warrants and an explicit prohibition on the detention and deportation of American citizens, and an end to the roving bands of ICE agents violently targeting people all across America. Those have been our conditions. Those will remain our conditions until we get this done for the American people. Thank you all.
Thank you.